In April of 2023, India's population exceeded China for the first time. As of mid-2024, India's population is now sitting at 1.45 billion and increasing at a rate of 0.89% every year, while China's population is sitting at 1.42 billion and decreasing at a rate of 0.23% every year. The median age in China is 40 years old, while the median age in India is 28. This means that India likely has a stronger, more productive workforce and definitely has a strong consumer market. In October, Taiwan opened a new branch of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Center in Mumbai. This will be Taiwan's third diplomatic mission in India. Today, we'll talk about India's increasing role in global geopolitics, its place in the Indo-Pacific region, and how it manages its tense relationship with China while being in the same summit, the BRICS nations, together. I'm your host, Joey Chou, and this is Beyond the Reefs. Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socio-economic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world, beyond the reefs of this island nation. In early November, the third Taiwan-India dialogue was held in Taipei. Deputy Foreign Minister Tian Zhongguang said in his opening remarks that Taiwan-India relations have made significant progress under the new southbound policy. There have been advancements in the fields of trade, investment, technology, and cultural exchange. Other developments include the signing of a Taiwan-India Labor Cooperation Memorandum, the formal establishment of Taiwan's office in Mumbai, and the presence of over 250 Taiwanese businesses in India. With 2025 marking the 30th anniversary of mutual representative offices, Tian expects bilateral ties to strengthen further. He said that democratic countries like Taiwan and India should collaborate to counter the threats of authoritarian expansion and security challenges. He urges a stronger Taiwan-U.S.-India trilateral cooperation, particularly as the new U.S. administration assumes office in January of 2025. Tian adds that Taiwan is a force for good in the international community, expressing Taiwan's commitment to contributing meaningfully in a pragmatic way. The event was jointly hosted by the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation, TAEF, and the Observer Research Foundation, ORF. The latter is an independent global think tank based in India. Our guest today is the Vice President of ORF, Dr. Harsh V. Pant. Dr. Pant actively contributes to the ORF's articles weekly and has personally authored many books on India's relationship with the Indo-Pacific region, including a book on Donald Trump's first term as president, and how Washington has changed the economic and geopolitical dynamic of the region. Let's first ask Dr. Pant to introduce himself.
So I'm Harsh Pant. I am an academic basically, and I am Professor of International Relations at King's College London. And that's what I've been doing now for the past, I think, 1.5 decades now. Increasingly, in the last few years, I've also been part of Indian strategic thinking landscape. I am part of public policy think tank in India, Observer Research Foundation, which is India's largest public policy think tank. It is independent, non-partisan, and it aims to inform public about the various public policy issues that impact them, and it engages in the realm of ideas, both generating ideas, generating new generation of leadership, but also communicating perhaps to people what is happening in various domains of public policy. And our largest vertical is international affairs and foreign policy, but we also do work on various other aspects like economic areas, technology, gender, SDGs, and various others. So for the last 6 years, I've been associated with Observer Research Foundation as its Vice President for Studies in Foreign Policy.
Okay, and like you said, you are a professor still in London. You've also written quite a few books, as well as publications that focuses on different areas of, be it economics or geopolitical matters around the world. Can you tell me what is your focus right now for the last maybe a couple of years?
For the last few years, I've been focusing a lot on, largely on Indo-Pacific, because there is so much happening in this region. There is so much turbulence, a shift in the balance of power with the rise of China, with how the US is looking at the region, how there are internal debates within the US, and what role US wants to play in the region. And of course, both India and Taiwan, we are all impacted by what is happening around us. So in a sense, also relating it to some of the most important strategic challenges that have emerged in this part of the world. And from India's perspective, of course, this is the most critical geography that India faces as it tries to emerge as an economic power and a geopolitical entity in the world. So I think in that context, both from a public policy point of view, from an academic point of view, the center of gravity of global politics and global economics has shifted to this part of the world, and then that has been the focus area for me in various ways. So whether you're looking at it in terms of balance of power, institutional frameworks, India's role there, or the role of India's partners. And I think also interestingly what is happening in India-Taiwan relationship.
And since you said that, India and Taiwan recently, I think there's been more connection between the two countries. So now that you are here as a part of a convoy with Observer Research Foundation, can you tell us what is the significant or the purpose of the ORF's visit here in Taiwan?
As academics and as researchers, of course, our role is to look at what is happening in the region and how we want to interact with regional players. But I think a large part of Indian foreign policy in the last few years has been about building partnerships with like-minded countries in the region and beyond. And I think Taiwan and India are like-minded entities in more ways than one, in the sense of what the structural challenges they face, as well as the opportunities that are being generated, both in terms of people-to-people ties, as well as other areas, which include semiconductors, for example, or student exchanges, labor mobility, IT, etc. I think all of those areas, which at one point were seen as largely non-traditional, certainly have become now very, very traditional areas, and both in the sense face similar challenges and perhaps similar opportunities that can be generated out of them. So I think as we look at which countries India is partnering with, where India can be engaged with more, Taiwan emerges as a very important partner in that regard. And as you were saying, increasingly in the last decade, we have seen greater interactions between various segments of India and Taiwan, whether it is private sector, whether it is students, cultural exchanges. So I think it gives, as students of Indian foreign policy, as students of Indo-Pacific politics, it gives us an opportunity to think about what perhaps are the opportunities here and how they can be mapped for the wider audience. And that's what we have been trying to do for some time now. We have a partnership with we work with various institutions in Taiwan, but our main partnership is with Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation, one of the major public policy think tanks here, which looks at Taiwan's engagement with Asia. So we are engaging with them on a regular dialogue. We do an annual dialogue with them. It's on a reciprocal basis. Sometimes you have academics from Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation coming to Delhi, and this time it is our turn to come and visit and see what is happening here.
Taiwan actually has a very sizable Indian population and very influential in the international communities, especially here in Taipei. And you just mentioned, be it the international student exchange or the migrant workers that is moving between the two countries, and also the new TECC office that's opened in Mumbai. Not to speak on behalf of New Delhi, but do you sense maybe in the capitals in India, are they closely watching Taiwan's relationship with China and the US? And can you kind of explain to our listeners what role Taiwan might play in affecting India's relationship with China?
I think we in India, of course, it has been a long-standing border issue with China, and which escalated in 2020. It was a major border crisis, and since then, I think the two governments have been struggling to come back to its to certain sense of normalcy. Very recently, we have had an agreement where status quo ante has been restored along the border, which existed before 2020. But I think many in India who have not taken kindly to what China did And I think there is a sense of distrust about Chinese motives, etc. It remains a very delicate and a very difficult relationship. But of course, much like Taiwan, we are also economically dependent on China. And I think so there is a strategic relationship, there is an economic relationship. And how do you navigate this very difficult balance that you want to have economic engagement, but at the same time, you want to also not have it on China's terms all the time, because that then creates dependencies that you want to avoid. And I think that's a struggle for India. But that's I think the road that India has taken, at least for now, that we will push back against some of the more nefarious activities that happen, but we will also try to see where we can work together for the common good, particularly in the economic sector. Now, here I think one of the things that is in India increasingly is doing is to build partnerships with countries, with entities, with nations, with institutions, without worrying about the Chinese veto. I think what used to happen in the past was that India would be very sensitive. So as you can imagine, if anything to do with Taiwan, China would be very, China would create a lot of hullabaloo about it. Why are you doing this? We will do this too. I think what we have seen now over the last decade is India making an independent choice that, look, we need to expand certain areas of cooperation with Taiwan, and whether it is technology, whether it is semiconductors, whether it is student exchanges, whether it is cultural exchanges. And I think economic and trade relationship has to grow with Taiwan independently of whatever China might want. I think that's a change, that's a shift in India's strategic landscape, which and that I think also applies to, as you mentioned, the US factor, because that used to happen also in the past. That, look, China would complain that, oh, you are becoming very close to the US. There is a platform called the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which is basically Japan, Australia, US, and India coming together and talking about Indo-Pacific. And China would complain and say that, look, this is all about containing China. But I think what India is now telling China and messaging China is that while it certainly would want to have a stable relationship with China on matters which are bilateral, where there is mutual benefit, but it would not give China a veto over which, where it engages and how it engages with. So I think that change is also manifesting itself in India-Taiwanese relationship, where we have seen an expansion of ties, where, as you were mentioning, there is a larger interest. We need to do more about, on certain areas where perhaps we had not done in the past. And it also becomes a way of perhaps circumventing this huge China dependency that both Taiwan and India have created for themselves, right? Because both we are so much dependent on China, that gives it a leverage in shaping our future, which I think both Taiwan and India they want to avoid. And we are therefore looking at, for example, a very critical area of semiconductors, where, of course, Taiwan is the world leader, and India perhaps is one of the few countries that can give, in some ways, Taiwan or Taiwanese industry, semiconductor industry, the scale that they want, which is what China has given to it. So in a sense, if there is a recalibration, if there is a reassessment, if there is a rethink, then both benefit. Taiwan and India both benefit. And I think that's the direction that we seem to be moving. And we will, my own sense is that we will see increasingly the relationship being driven by the bottom up, where you have greater exchanges of students, where you have greater exchanges of intellectuals, where you have greater exchanges of artists and industry people, private sector, corporate sector. And it will also then shape the sort of top-down engagement, that where the two governments can also then make bolder and more forward-looking choices.
Yeah, you mentioned semiconductor a couple of times, and the U.S., of course, Commerce Department has recently just imposed another round of ban of AI chips to China. So more or less, India and Taiwan will maybe be forced to choose a side, whether we like it or not. So how that relationship, between India, Taiwan, China, and the U.S. might pan out is going to largely be dependent on how Trump decides to run his administration for the next 4 years. You've written a book about his last administration, and in a recent article for ORF, you actually outlined how a Trump 2.0 administration may come to light. So can you tell us how you might estimate he may play his cards differently this time around, and how that might affect India or Taiwan?
I think Mr. Trump certainly needs to be given a lot of credit in his first term, where he single-handedly almost changed the perspective of not only the West, but I think a large part of the world insofar as China was concerned. I think the China debate shifted in his first term in ways that we were not anticipating. We all thought, I think we all imagined and we all expected that given the dependencies the economic dependencies between America and China, uh, all leaders will be cautious, and therefore Mr. Trump would also not push beyond the point. But I think the way he framed the debate around China, and I think at times at that point in time it looked overblown, perhaps. But I think the consequences of that debate have been that more and more countries have begun to realize the challenge of this over dependence. And of course, after that, COVID happened, and the entire issue of supply chain resilience became very important. So I think countries and nations started looking at economic interdependence through a larger geopolitical lens. That unless you have political trust, you really don't want to be in a position where you are giving leverage through economic means to others. So, in a sense, economic relationships, economic interdependence, this argument was turned on its head, right? In the past, we used to say if you create economic interdependence, you will generate political trust. But I think a lot of the countries realized that that was not happening. In this particular case, I think in China's case in particular, we have seen that the more economically interdependent you become with China, the more coercive China becomes. And I think that whether it was Australia, Japan, we have seen that in the case of Southeast Asian countries. Taiwan, of course, has been a victim, and India, in a different ways. And I think that was perhaps Mr. Trump's contribution, a significant one in the first term, where he changed the China discourse, and he allowed countries to therefore rethink their assumptions about under what terms do they want to economically engage with China, not politically, but even economically. And I think that argument has continued to move ahead. Under Biden also, we have seen that there are a lot of differences between Biden and Trump, but I think on this fundamental question, we have not seen a shift. In fact, Biden also, if you look at how they have treated China, it has been a very, very robust pushback against China. And now, when Mr. Trump comes back, he comes back with a massive mandate. He comes back with a bigger mandate. He comes with a popular mandate. He comes with a once in a lifetime shift in balance of power, where he will have the Senate. He will have the Republicans will have. I think it's very likely that we'll have the House. So in a sense, he will have lots of power to again push back, and he has made it very clear that he wants to go in with a bang into this China debate. And he's very. I mean, there are challenges there in terms of how he structures his tariffs, for example. And I think countries like India are also looking at it with wariness, that maybe some part of that tariff war will come to India. But I think it will be focused on China. It will be focused on this great power contestation, the lens that America is using to view China. And I do think, therefore, that Indo-Pacific will continue to remain at the center of American engagement, although there are domestic priorities that they want to set. And in that sense, for the US, for Washington, it will be important to have Taiwan, India, Japan, Australia as the critical partners who can help America manage that transition, because clearly, China is very big, and no one wants to, take an adversarial position towards China. But I think increasingly, what is happening is that the ball is now in Chinese court as to how they want to relate to us. And I think India has made this point very clear after 2020, that it is for China to decide if they want to have a relationship that is friendlier, that is stable, that is forward-looking, or if they want to end up in a relationship where it is largely about adversarial tendencies, getting accelerated. So I do think that we are looking at a very critical phase, and under Trump, that space to maneuver might increase for both Taiwan and India vis-a-vis China, and vis-a-vis the emerging strategic landscape of the Indo-Pacific. Of course, there are challenges elsewhere, immigration, and how far the tariffs would go, and what kind of engagement will we see from the US, because I think as America's partners, we do want greater American engagement and continued American engagement in the region. But I do think that Mr. Trump and his focus on the kind of appointments that he has made so far, what we are hearing, Mr. Lighthizer and others, I think all of them, they tell us that the trajectory is largely going to continue along the same lines as in the past, and much more robustly, perhaps, now that he has all the levers of power in his hands.
And that concludes our conversation with Observer Research Foundation's Vice President, Dr. Harsh V. Pant. I'm Joey Chou, and you have been listening to Beyond the Reefs.